Good morning on YouTube. We're going to get our Facebook groups in here as we get started here on this lovely Wednesday morning here in Atlanta. Atlanta Falcons fans on All Falcons, about 13.5 strong and growing. So come join it if you haven't already. And Scott Kennedy Sports on Facebook. And we're going to hit up on a bunch of topics today ahead of training camp. And good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Kennedy. I am your host today for the Falcons Podcast. I will be flying solo, so I could use your help in the comments and chat in order to push us along. Want to talk a few things that we're gonna hit on before we get into it as the algorithms reach out and find everybody out there and the stream starts opening up and our chat gets busier and busier as it goes on. One of the first things I want to talk about is some of the moves the Falcons made on Tuesday. The Calais Campbell move to the non-football injury list. We'll talk about that one. Michael Pruitt, tight end, being brought back and what we think of that move. And Caleb Huntley being officially waived after being on the PUP list and what that could mean for his future. Those are a few of the things. I want to talk some season expectations. And I know as we're getting closer, we're going to have a lot of new eyeballs in here. So don't be afraid to ask me some questions that you think we may have already hit on. Desmond Ridder expectations, Bijan Robinson, what do you think of the draft pick? We can go through all of that stuff again. That is just fine. I don't mind hitting on that again. And finally, I did 2 hours last night with the Out of Your Falcon Mind podcast, so I feel like I've hit on just about everything. So I'm going to lean on the chat in the second half of this podcast. I want to know what your biggest questions are. Consider this a mailbag. I got my mailbox right back here. You can see it. Facing the other way. It's over here. So my Falcons mailbox, consider this a mailbag today. So put in the chat some of the questions that you have. We will show them. Obviously, Super Chats and Stars get priority, so don't be afraid to help support the show as well. Let's say hello to some of the folks that have been waiting and have come in nice and early. Floyd Donnelly has been in. He says it's good morning to be a football fan. It's usually a good morning to be a football fan, so appreciate you being here, Floyd. And he says good morning, Scott, as well. And Alan says, good morning, gentlemen. I watched you on the Out of Your Falcon Mind podcast. That was a good show. Alan, I appreciate that. That felt like a good show. We went almost 2 hours. That surprised me a little bit. They're like, how long are you going to stay? I'm like, oh, I'm good. I was like, I thought they were talking 30 minutes to an hour, but, we went almost 2 hours. So we hit on all kinds of topics. All-time favorite Falcons, season expectations. So I simulcast to my channel. So check it out if you want to watch it on this YouTube channel and go through it as well. Michael Ranquillo, he, after building the Broncos last night, jumped over and said hello last night. I appreciate that, Michael. How you doing? And 100 Realist says, good morning, Scott. Hope all is well and good. The same with you, my friend. Appreciate that. And our Facebook groups are starting to open up a little bit. And Brad Clark over on Facebook says, good day, rise up, and looking forward to this season. So good morning, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Feels like the calm before the storm a little bit as as training camp will open up. A little programming note. I will be here at camp. I say here. I will be at training camp on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So we'll have plenty to talk about on Monday as we go through. And I may come back on Friday afternoon. We might do a pod. So make sure you are subscribing and follow me on Twitter at Scout Kennedy. That way you can get the alerts if we do go live and have a quick chat. Jason Heller showing up this morning. Appreciate you being here. He says, mornings, Super Scott. Yeah, that's a new one for me. I expect the Falcons to shock the NFL and play for a conference championship. Jason, I don't think that's completely out of the question. It's still surprising to me how little respect this team is getting. You look at the power rankings and they're hovering around 27. Well, if you look at their record the last 2 years, they finished with the eighth worst record. Actually, based on different tiebreakers, they could have been anywhere from 8 to like 14 the year before. There were so many 7 and 10 teams, which puts them right at the bottom end of mediocre. This Falcons team on paper is so much improved. The roster is so much improved. To have them down in the low 20s at, 26, 27, 28, 29 on the power rankings, it just doesn't seem right to me. And, Desmond Ridder. Okay, well, is he that bad? Do you think he's that bad that he's going to be a detriment to a team that has everything else in decent shape compared to the last 2 seasons? Doesn't make sense to me so much. Jim Frank, great live, Scott, watching you from Seoul, South Korea. Appreciate you being in, Jim. and hope everything is going well over there. I would love to get over in that neck of the woods. I've traveled all over this great world of ours, and I've not been into Asia yet. I want to, or any parts of that. I do. I scuba dive, and I'm sure there's some great diving that goes on over there. So got to head that direction soon. So I hope you are doing well over there. Probably a little muggy, probably a little hot. It's been hot. But let's get into the Calais Campbell news. And apologies in advance. I put a gotcha kind of headline out there, and you have to get attention out there and earn some money and make a living. I said it's a big blow to the Falcons that he's on the NFI, the non-football injury list. And one of the reasons I put that out there was just because it was surprising to me that he was put on a non-football injury list. And Arthur Smith clarified, and frankly, Calais was out there with media availability, never mentioned anything. I consider it an OG move, an old guy. Part of the reason you're bringing him in is because, that he chooses, he's a 1-year contract, is, listen, relax. You're at the back end of your career. We trust you'll be ready. You're not going to be playing 70% of the snaps. You're going to be here as a mentor. This was probably your last stop before you retire. When you're ready to come in, come in. That was probably agreed to before he signed a contract. I'm not worried about it. Arthur Smith addressed it. He said it was just a personal thing. I just think he's there on a non-football injury list. It surprised me a little bit that they made that move. Are you making that move because you want to get somebody else out there in the 90 that you're going to have to make another move as soon as you activate Calais Campbell? So to me, that part was a little surprising. Why not just give him a couple days off? To actually put a designation on him, thought that caught me a little bit by surprise. I think it caught several people by surprise, but I'm not worried about his availability as far as health goes. And, what are you expecting? Are you expecting, a 28-year-old prime Calais Campbell? No, but can he be an improvement over the depth on the 2 deep that the Falcons have had the last 2 years? Absolutely. And I was asked earlier this year, what was your favorite move the Falcons made? And I actually said Calais Campbell was probably my favorite move because it was a statement signing. Calais Campbell could have gone and played at a bunch of different places around the NFL, and he chose Atlanta. And part of that sell was Arthur Blank and what he likes to do in the community. And Campbell wants to be involved in outreach and helping to help those that are less fortunate than him. And Arthur Blank helped sell him, listen, you can come do that in Atlanta. That speaks well for the franchise, the project they're building, the city, and everything. That should make you feel good. It made me feel good being a local person, being an ATLian. Made me feel good that a guy like Calais Campbell chose to come here to this city and to this franchise. Want to say hello to Keith. Keith Robbins coming up. It says, good morning. Good morning to you, Keith. Keith has the the all too familiar upside down drinking bird as his avatar there. His why do I always forget what it calls? The thumbnail. Hopefully it won't be too bad. Those were very common around Atlanta. I think the Aints had the paper bags. The Falcons had the drunk bird. And Jason B comes and he says, that was smart to bring in somebody while Calais is out. The more players in the system, the better. To a certain extent, who do you have? But, these are people's lives you're dealing with. Hey, come sign. We're going to give you $500 to come play at camp for a day, a non-guaranteed contract. While you're here, you get paid. And then we're going to waive you in 2 days. And Arthur Smith talking about Caleb Huntley reference that this, it's a tough part of the business. So let's talk about Caleb Huntley just a little bit. He was put on the PUP, the physically unable to perform list following his leading into camp, following his Achilles surgery last year that he injured during the season. And then he was outright waived, designated yesterday. I intimated that this probably, we may not see the end of Caleb Huntley, and Arthur Smith did say the same thing. This might not be the end for him while he's, as an Atlanta Falcon. The 53-man roster projection from Michael Rothstein on ESPN on Monday had 4 running backs. I'm like, no, I do not see this team taking 4 running backs. They only had 2 active on week 1. You want to have 3. We saw that as soon as Damian Williams went hurt, but you want to have 3. But I think you have three active on your, and then maybe a specialist on there. Avery Williams was that guy. He was kind of running back 3/4, but he was your starting punt returner. So, and did some kick return duties. So I think Caleb Huntley wasn't going to make the 53 regardless. Making that move now helps you bring in another body at camp, and it will open up to be able to sign him back to the practice squad or whatnot here in the next few months, next few weeks. So I'm hoping, what I really hope is that he's 100% and he gets another shot with another team to be on the 53, because I don't think he's going to make the 53 this year, even fully healthy. You got Tyler Algier, you got Bijan Robinson, you got Cordero Patterson. I don't see a fourth running back on the 53 unless, like I said, it was an Avery Williams type who is then, he's RB4, but he's really punt returner 1, kick returner 1. So I thought he was going to have a hard time making this team anyway. And I root for players, and I wouldn't mind seeing him get picked up and on a 53 somewhere, but it's going to be tough for him this year. So if he's back on the practice squad and makes a nice paycheck doing that for the next year while he's rehabbing and getting back to full strength, good for him. So that's those are my thoughts on Caleb Huntley. I'm not surprised that he was waived at all. So hopefully he's going to be healthy, but it's going to be tough for a fourth running back to make this roster, period, let alone one coming off of an injury. Jason Heller coming in. He says, $500, sign me up. You want to pay me to meet and play with a team for a day? I'm in. Yeah, you might not say that when the pads come on and it's 95 degrees and 98% humidity and you've got to play running back and go in and find Troy Anderson on the other side of that. So, I kick an ankle bite. I can go in and dive at someone's ankles on there and slip down. But, man, if I even so much as took a handoff and accelerated full speed, I'd pull a muscle. It's about as long as I would last. Chris Walker, good morning. Appreciate you being here, Chris, over on Facebook. He says, good morning, Scott and everybody else. I hate it about Caleb Huntley, but hope he's back at some point. I do too. He, as Keith says, he ran hard. If I'm another team, there was a saying, I don't know if y'all remember this. It may have been Joe Torre. It may have been Lou Piniella. He said, when the Atlanta Braves start talking pitchers, hang up the phone. Meaning that if they're after one of yours, keep that guy. And if they're trying to send you a pitcher, you don't want him. Why? Because the Atlanta Braves know pitchers. And this was back in the 90s. The Atlanta Braves know pitching. So if they want to talk pitchers, you hang up right away. You're going to come out on the wrong end of this. I'm starting to feel that way about running backs with the Atlanta Falcons. If I'm watching and I'm scouting, I'm like, listen, I need a running back. Let's go see who the Falcons have stashed on their practice squad. That's they're starting to be that way. Caleb Huntley did a really good job for this team last year, and he's coming off the practice squad. Frankly, he's one of the reasons, him and Tyler Algier in the 5th round, that I was like, you don't really need a Bijan Robinson in the 1st. Let's go in a different direction. But we can get into that if you want to. I'm perfectly okay with the pick, and I've explained a zillion times why he wouldn't have been my first pick, but why I can easily justify the pick of Bijan Robinson. Jason B coming in is, I think Caleb showed enough to get a couple more opportunities, especially with the cheap running back trend. So do I. He's going to have to pass a physical and prove that he's 100%. Like I just said, if I needed a running back, I'd be looking at who the Falcons have had, because they've done a really good job of scouting running backs the last few years. Ryan Adonis coming in. Appreciate you, Ryan. Good to see you this morning. Says, a guy to look to shine is running back BJ Baylor. I think he was signed in the middle of last season, if I'm not mistaken. I've kind of forgotten about him. I know the 4th guy on the roster for Rothstein's projections was Carlos Washington. And I didn't really even pay that close attention to it, because there's not going to be enough carries and touches to go around that the 4th running back is going to really bother me. It's just, there's not going to be around that I'm going to have to remember the name of the 4th running back this year. Keith asked, do you think that Huntley failed a physical or something? No. Well, I mean, probably, but that's why he was pupped. He wasn't ready to go. That's why he was put on the physical unable to perform list. Why not keep him around any longer? I don't know. If he got an injury settlement, I don't think he can play in the NFL for the next year. We'll have to find out a little bit more about that one. And then the third move, excuse me, my nose is itching this morning. Some of these summer allergies kicking in. The third move that was made is one I'm really, really happy with. It was another player coming off an injury that the Falcons signed. Yes, off the Tennessee Titans was Michael Pruitt, tight end. And for those of you that have watched the show before, I talk about the comments, and sometimes, I like to see what are people saying about this guy on his way out. If the LA Chargers were to ask me, and ask us, come in here and say, hey, what do you think? We just signed Caleb Huntley. We'd get nothing but good things to say about Caleb Huntley. That's a good thing. Good recommendation. We're rooting for the guy. Good luck. Love him. Hope he plays well for y'all. Those were a lot of the same feelings that Pruitt had from Tennessee Titans fans when he came over. He suffered a rough leg break in January of 2022, which ended his season. So he was available to the Falcons, who were, on nickels and dimes last year and trying to scrape together veteran minimums in order to put a team out there. So he was available because he was injured, and he came in and he played really, really well. Once he got fully healthy, I was a little disappointed when he wasn't brought back. So maybe there was some talk in the background, hey, sit tight. We got you. We got to do some other things, but, and you take a risk with that because someone could come and offer him a nice big contract. But hopefully you get the feeling they've stayed in touch with Michael Pruitt, and he played really well last year. He was thought of as a blocking guy who can do some receiving. The blocking will come easier than the separation trying to get open when you're coming off of an injury. But then he finished relatively strong. He was one of the leading reception guys in touchdowns with 4 touchdowns last year. In his last 2 games with Desmond Ridder, he had 7 catches for 83 yards. So if you extrapolate 40 yards per game across 17 games, you're talking 700 yards, 680 yards. I think my math's right on that. 700 yards, and he did 4 touchdowns, and maybe 5 or 6 touchdowns over the course of a year. And again, he's not going to be a primary receiver, but it goes to the answer of, can Desmond Ridder get these guys the ball? He was getting the ball to Michael Pruitt and Drake London. What happens when I've got Drake London and Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts out there? Let's turn Michael Pruitt into Kyle Pitts and turn him into a primary target. And let's see if Desmond Ridder can get the ball to some of these guys. I think it bodes well. You got Jonnu Smith, Michael Pruitt, and Kyle Pitts as your primary tight ends. Kyle Pitts will be moved all over the place. I'll be really interested to see if at the end of the year, if he's got more snaps lined up in the slot and outside than he does as an inline tight end. I would guess right now that he might. That I would say he would. If you're asking me, where's he going to line up? I'm going to say he's going to line up 51% or more of the time in the slot or outside, as opposed to hand in the dirt, inline tight end. So, out of your Falcon Mind podcast, this is probably John or Mike, or John and Mike coming in. He says, morning, Scott, digging that shirt. That's got to be John. I think he is a Chelsea fan. Chelsea's playing right back there tonight. So they brought in some grass. They've put it down there in the bends tonight. So my team, my football team, is playing at the bends this evening, and I will be down there to see them play Newcastle. So I would imagine there's probably going to be 60,000 strong there. Going to be a good time. So if you happen to see me, I'll be wearing this shirt. Say hello. Say hello if you're down there. So, and Keith says, Pitts to wide receiver. He played a lot of wide receiver last year. I promise you that. And when it comes time to negotiate a contract for him, his agent's going to be talking about how much he played wide receiver. It might not matter. You start thinking like, do I want to be a tackle or a guard? You want to be a guard because you want to be a tackle because tackles make more money than guards. But at the very top, very, very top, it's pretty similar. $20 million for Chris Lindstrom would make him top 2 or 3 offensive tackle money also. So the top tight end, if he goes out and becomes the best tight end in this league, he's going to get paid with the top 5 wide receivers. I believe that. I don't think it's really going to matter. He goes out there and he's got 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns. He's going to get $18 million a year. No doubt. So we're 20 minutes in. Wanted to, I talked about Michael Pruitt. I talked about Caleb Huntley. I talked about Calais Campbell. Couple of non-Falcons or ex-Falcons I wanted to talk on was Matt Ryan. He got his broadcasting assignments. You can find it on CBS. I didn't realize he was going to be an in the booth guy. I will actually watch him then because I watch games. I don't watch booths. I don't watch studio shows. I just don't care. But good for him. I'll be interested to see what kind of takes he has. But he's out of football into the booth officially this year. And good for him. And the other one was Calvin Ridley is a full go. That soundbite came out from Coach Peterson down in Jacksonville. That should be good news for the Atlanta Falcons. Now they play Jacksonville in London. That's an away game, the home of it's not at Chelsea Stadium, it's at Spurs Stadium, but that's neither here nor there. London is blue. They will play Jacksonville there, so you hope that Ridley doesn't have a big game with the Jaguars against the Falcons. But if he signs another contract, I believe that escalates too. So if they sign him to an extension or a new contract or whatever, because he's playing on an option year this year, that trade escalates to a second-round pick. So that would be nice. So I don't have a whole lot of good remembering of Calvin Ridley, but here's hoping that he gets signed to another contract. So wanted to, like I said, we're going to cut this a little bit short tonight unless y'all have a bunch of stuff that you want to talk about. If you do, now's the time. Because right now I'm just thinking, getting ready for training camp, going to have a whole lot of new things to talk about instead of rehashing some of the old ones. So we're not going to have a whole lot to say today. Wanted to hit on some of the news that we had and then move on, unless you had, like I said, some questions to come in, like Maserati Swift or a Swift Maserati. He says, Texans fan here. I hope you guys have a great season and beat Carolina. Beat the cat food out of them. That's week 1, Maserati Swift. Frank Reich and Bryce Young come to the Mercedes. I still want to call it the Georgia Dome. Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and we'll take on Atlanta in week 1. And as we went through the schedule yesterday, I think that needs to be a win for the Falcons. Rookie quarterback making his first start, new head coach, new system. Everybody's trying to think. Now, I really like the defense that the Panthers are able to put out there when they are playing hard. They were such a weird team last year and the last 2 years. They'd look either like a team that quit or a team that could go and make a run in the playoffs. So it's up to Frank Reich to try and mold all those guys together. But I think the offense will take a little bit of time. The Falcons should be ahead of them at this stage of the season at home. That I like the Falcons in that game. And as Keith says, it will always be the Georgia Dome. And if you're, an old guy like me, you may have gone down to old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. That was fun. But I think I was at the very first Falcons game. It was a preseason game at the Georgia Dome. And I feel like it was Chris Miller to like Michael Haynes or somebody. It was a long bomb to open up the Georgia Dome. But I was there. I think it was against the Jets. I feel like 92 or something. It couldn't have been that long ago. But yeah, it was, 20, they imploded that thing after 20 years. So, a good time. Jason Heller says, Scott, you asked, what do we expect this year? I would expect to hear the names of our players from the last 3 drafts a lot more, like D'Angelo Malone, Drew Dahlman, Richie Grant, Taquan Graham, Arnold Ebiketie, et cetera, et cetera. And Jason, for me, I think Drew Dahlman, you don't want to hear his name. He's a center. So I know what you're saying there, though. Dahlman really came on at the end of last year. I was really impressed with that. He was part of that. You mentioned 2 of those guys. Dahlman and Grant were acquired via trade with the Denver Broncos, where they used the Falcons' second-round pick to take Javonte Williams, who is a medical marvel right now, who looks like he's going to be back from a devastating knee injury, had a really good rookie season. Dahlman and Grant didn't do much as rookies, but then they both became starters last year. And Dahlman, I thought, played really well last year, and Grant was improving. They need to keep going. They need to keep progressing to the next step. D'Angelo Malone, a third-year edge guy, speed guy, a little undersized, would be nice. It'd be nice to see him get out there and contribute. Taquan Graham, to me, was a revelation in year 2. Year 1, he was thrown to the Wolves. There were 3 guys like that were rookies. Jalen Mayfield, Taquan Graham, and Ade Ogundeji. All 3 of them struggled mightily because they were out there too early. Mayfield didn't play at all last year after an injury that kept him out. And frankly, his lack of ability may have kept him out. Ogundeji was still a liability, but Taquan Graham was playing really, really well. It was, to me, one of the biggest surprise for me of the season was Caleb McGarry at right tackle. The next one, and not far behind, was Taquan Graham. So would love to see more of him, and then come back with this much deeper defensive line. And then Arnold Ebiketie, not an overly high pick for an edge. Typically edges like quarterbacks, you need to get them really, really high for them to be an alpha guy. I still kind of picture him as a Robin to someone else's Batman. They just haven't found Batman yet. They haven't found that guy. Ebiketie can be really good, and hopefully he starts getting some of the numbers to go with his production, because he was getting pressure on the quarterback last year, but he didn't have a lot of sacks. But good shout. And Richie Grant, I think, needs to really take that next step. He was non-existent year one under Dean Pease. He was okay last year. Now he needs to move up to that. Okay, he's a solid safety. They used a high pick on him. A second-round pick for a safety is a high pick. It's like using one on a center or a guard. If I'm using a second-round pick on a center or a guard, they better play well. Chris Walker comes in. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of coffee here. In terms of training camp, I'm interested in seeing how the battles for linebacker and the secondary after Caden Ellis, AJ Terrell, and Jesse Bates turn out. I feel like if there's the most settled unit on the field is probably the offensive line, with the exception of left guard, as Matt Hennessy and Matthew Bergeron will battle for that spot. After that, I feel like there's three linebackers that will see plenty of time in a rotation, and Caden Ellis, Troy Anderson, and Michael Walker. And after that, it's like, yeah, that next guy's going to see time on special teams, and that's about it. In the secondary, though, AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates are the only ones for me that are written in Sharpie. Jeff Okudah should get that spot as a second corner. We expect him to, but he's been hit and miss with Detroit. Now, a number 3 overall pick not living up to expectations would still be better than the Fabian Moreaus of the world. Casey Hayward played well last year until he was hurt, and they improved. But no one has more reason and more incentive to play well than Jeff Okudah does. He's a free agent after this year. They didn't pick up his 5th-round contract. Detroit is paying him to play for Atlanta. He's got a lot to play for. If he has a good season, he can make a $10 million. He can get an 8-figure contract the same way that Caleb McGarry did. That's a problem I want the Falcons to have. I want people to start saying, wow, they've got these 2 young corners. How are they going to keep them both? That's going to be tough. That'd be a nice problem to have. And then Jesse Bates, he's there. Richie Grant, we just mentioned him. Can he take that next step and really form an elite partnership with Jesse Bates? Really good questions out. There's depth there that there hasn't been. Keith Robbins says, I've been a fan since 1989. Dang, I'm old. 89. I started in 80. So you missed the 80s, Keith. 1980 was the only winning season the Falcons had in the 80s. It was rough. It helped shape my professional life, because that's how I started getting into the NFL draft, was the Falcons. The Falcons historically, they weren't going to sign free agents. Free agency was nothing to Atlanta except to see, hey, we got a good player. He's going somewhere else because Rankin Smith won't pay anybody. That I got into the draft. So it was tough. And it was 92 or 94 for the Georgia Dome. I thought it was 92. The Olympics were here in 96. So they definitely did a lot of stuff here. For sure. And Chris says, I'm still not sold on Grant. I'm not either. And we shouldn't be. Richie Grant still has a lot to prove. But the talent around him is so much better. It was nice having that veteran presence and Eric Harris or whatnot. But, now he's got Jesse Bates in there. They're the same age. I think they're both 26 years old or right there within a couple of months of 26. They're the same age. You've got AJ Terrell and Jeff Okudah, who were in the same draft class. They're the same age. This could be really a unit that can grow and build together for the next 5 years. So it's on them, though. They're certainly going to get the opportunity. So I appreciate everybody coming in. We're right at 30 minutes. I'm going to call it an early day today. We'll be back. Like I said, make sure you hit those notifications and hit subscribe, because I might be back on Friday. We'll see how I'm feeling after being out in the sun all morning, watching camp on Thursday and Friday. But we might be back here Friday morning to talk a little bit more Atlanta Falcons in camp, but we will definitely be back on Monday morning after the full weekend of training camp to see how things are going. So football's here, y'all. I know you're excited. I'm excited about this team. After preaching doom and gloom and patience for the last 2 years, there's some expectations with this team. Arthur Smith is embracing those expectations. I've seen some quotes from him this morning. Says no one has more higher expectations than I do. He's changed the culture with this team back into a smash mouth team. Toughness, no excuses. This team played hard for him the last 2 years, and I'm really interested to see what he can do with a team that has more talent instead of a bunch of guys scrapping for their NFL lives. These are some guys with some good money and good contracts. Can you take those guys and then push them forward into a better team? So thank you, everybody, for being here. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Get those notifications in case we do some extra episodes. But if not, we will definitely be back here at 9 a.m. on Monday. Until then, y'all have a great week and a great weekend. And thanks for being here.